Here we go, boys and girls. It's time to do the biggest preview of the year, which is none other than the preview of MLS Cup 2020 between the Seattle Sounders versus Columbus Crew, which will kick off tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific on Fox. And before I begin this preview, I just want to say that it's definitely been a difficult year for every MLS team that's been involved this season, and also in the postseason for all the teams that was involved. But I think there is no other team that has been dealing with more difficulty than any other team so far, especially in the postseason, than none other than the Columbus Crew. Because during this postseason, not only the fact that they had to face against some good opponent, but they also had to deal with a COVID outbreak that was going on in their team. And technically, that COVID outbreak is still going right now. I mean, they're still getting positive cases on their team. And yesterday, they just announced that two of their most important player in the starting 11 is not medically cleared to play in this game. And we'll get to who those two players are. But most likely, those are two players that adds to the list of players that unfortunately tested positive for COVID-19. And that, I know the Crew obviously is going to be once again shorthanded in this game against the Sounders. And I know this means that pretty much the Sounders are heavy favorites coming into this game. And I also feel like there's even some people saying that you might as well just hand the trophy to the Seattle Sounders, which I think that is a huge disrespect toward the Columbus Crew, and also the fact that it's clearly premature in terms of talking about the fact that this game hasn't even played, and you already said you might as well just award the trophy to the other team. Because at the end of the day, this is a cup final, and in a cup final, it doesn't matter who is the favorites and who is the underdogs coming into this game. You always have a chance to win this game, and I know this is going to sound like a little bit of a cliche, but in a cup final, it's all about the big moments. Whoever is able to come big during this game and have the big moments is most likely going to win this cup final and become the champion of this season in MLS. But that being said, let us actually get into the preview and talk about how both of these teams got to MLS Cup. Because for the Columbus Crew, in the round of 16, they were able to win 3-2 against the Red Bulls. And although the scoreline was pretty close, it really wasn't. I mean, that was probably one of the more dominant performance a team in the postseason is able to do. And the Red Bulls only made it close late in the game to really just made it into a one-score game. But then in the quarterfinal, they definitely had a tough task against Nashville. But that was also the time when they had like 6 or 7 players that was tested positive for COVID-19, and that's when the outbreak began. And I thought Columbus was doomed at that point. Like, we saw what happened with Inter Miami when they had a COVID outbreak and how they pretty much folded as soon as they played Nashville in the play-in round, and it seemed like it was going to happen with Columbus too. And even though most of those cases didn't really involve with the starting 11, I still think that that is going to be a tough mountain to climb against a Nashville team that was probably one of the hottest team coming into the playoffs, and the team that was full of confidence. But they beat them. They beat them in extra time and winning 2-0 in that one. Before, in the very next one against New England, another very hot team coming into the postseason, and they dispatched them by winning 1-0 in the conference final to get to this point where they get to host whoever plays in the Western, whoever is going to be representing the Western Conference in MLS Cup. Now, for the Seattle Sounders, in the round of 16, they had their first real test against LAFC, and they were able to win 3-1 in that one. And I thought after they were able to beat LAFC, they were really kind of the favorites in terms of coming out of the West, because after the round of 16, and when I look at all the team remain in that, I just feel like the Sounders was the strongest team. And then the next game against Dallas, although Dallas did cause a big upset against the Portland Timbers, I still think the Sounders was definitely going to be the one that's going to come out on top. And even though they didn't play their best in that game, and it wasn't a vintage playoff performance by the Seattle Sounders, they were able to come out with a 1-0 victory and kind of do what champions always do, where when you're not at your best and you're still able to squeak by to move on into the next round, that's when you know that this is definitely a good team and it's a championship mentality team. And that championship mentality couldn't be said more about that conference final. And as much as it still hurts me to say this, I mean, you know, you got to give credit to what the Sounders did to Minnesota, where there's not a lot of team that could be down 2-0 in the conference final heading into the last 15 minutes and not only able to complete a comeback in the last 15 minutes, but to win the game, to win 3-2 in that one to reach MLS Cup. Like, that is something that is just shows the mentality and just shows kind of how good the Seattle Sounders is, and they also kind of show that never say die mentality to get to this point in MLS Cup. Now, in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup between both of these teams, believe it or not, both of these teams actually met early in the season. If you go all the way back in March, when things were still much simpler and the world didn't really go completely berserk, they actually met in the second week of the season, and it was the Sounders drawing 1-1 against Columbus. But obviously, I'm not going to use that as a way to kind of look at this result, because that was a long time ago, and a lot of things have changed ever since that matchup. But before that, it was the Sounders winning 2-1 on the road against Columbus. Before it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams. The Crew did win 3-0 against the Seattle Sounders before the Sounders did win 1-0 against the Columbus Crew. So the Sounders certainly has the advantage in terms of the last 5 head-to-head matchup. But now let's get into the key points, and now let's get into probably the biggest talking point during this game. And that, of course, is the Columbus Crew going to be shorthanded, and they're going to have to deal in this game without having 2 of their biggest star players. And those 2 players are Darlington Nagbe and Pedro Santos. And, I can see why there's some people say that, the Crew might now have pretty much no chance of winning this, because of the fact that Nagbe means so much in terms of this team. And in terms of the way that they, of course, play, which is kind of control possession. And obviously Pedro Santos add another threat in terms of the wing area and another threat on the attacking part. But with both of those guys not being available in this game, it is definitely a huge blow for the Columbus Crew, and it's going to be tough for them to try to overcome that. I mean, there are some good backup options for both of these guys, but at the same time, losing 2 of these guys in an MLS Cup final, like, that's already kind of a mountain that the Crew is going to have to climb into, and we shall see how they are going to do and how much of an impact that will be coming into this game. Now, despite the fact that the Crew are going to be missing those 2 big star player, and as much as I also said about how the Crew are definitely going to be up against it, Seattle can't treat this like this is pretty much an easy win. Like, again, I have already heard people saying that congratulations to the Seattle Sounders of winning their second MLS Cup, even though this game hasn't even kicked off. And I hope the Sounders don't have the same mentality of those people that prematurely declare the Sounders the winner of this MLS Cup, because despite the fact that the Crew are missing those 2 big players, they still have some very dangerous weapon on their team that they're going to have to deal with. And this Crew team, they also been battling with injuries throughout the majority of the season, and they still able to come out strong, at least for most part of those games. So yeah, the Sounders, they cannot underestimate the Crew, despite the fact that they are shorthanded. And also, since this is a cup final, you never want to overlook or even underestimate the opponents that you face, because you know that they're going to be up for in the cup final, whether they are shorthanded or not, because this is the biggest game for most of these players, and a game that for most of these players, this might be a once in a lifetime kind of thing. And that, there's always a note saying that even though you're in a cup final, you don't want to take it for granted and just think that you're going to come back next season or in the future of your career. This might be a once in a life opportunity where you might never get back to the MLS Cup. So both of these teams, and I think for the Seattle Sounders, I know there's a lot of players that have been back in this situation, but they got to also pretend that this might be their last chance in terms of winning MLS Cup, and that they're going to be facing a Crew team that also have players, especially most of those players on that team, that have never been to an MLS Cup, and that most of those players are going to think that this is their chance to really complete a great achievement in their career, which is winning an MLS Cup. Now, the third key points I would say for the Sounders, we talked about how the Crew are are dealing with some back-breaking injury, while the Sounders kind of had to deal with some injury of their own too. They of course will not have their center back Arriaga in this game because he had to take a parental leave, and congratulations of his family getting a new baby. But that being said, he is not going to be available in this game, and the question, of course, is now who, of course, will partner Neymar in terms of the center back partnership. Now, this one is a relatively easy answer or easy question to pretty much answer. And when I first wrote this, I didn't realize that Shane O'Neill actually started for the Sounders for their entire playoff game. But yeah, I mean, no, I really am surprised how good Shane O'Neill has been with the Sounders and how effective he has been during this postseason. And I'm assuming it's going to be the same thing in this game where he is going to be starting right next to Neymar. And that, in terms of the backup option, and if Schmetzer decided to maybe substitute one of his center back, they always will have Roman Torres there as one of their depth pieces. And I know Roman Torres isn't as viable as we've seen in the past, and he isn't as good as he was with the Sounders a couple years ago, but I think that's still a very good option in terms of if they want to bring one of their center back off the bench coming into this game. Now, the other thing that I think we got to also look out for is that which attack will step up in this game. And again, another cliche I would say about a cup final is that whoever attack is able to score the goals, and whoever really will score the first goal in this game will definitely have a big advantage in terms of winning MLS Cup outright. And that when you look at both of these attack, I know it's very easy to say that obviously the attack is going to be in favor of the Seattle Sounders, because when you have those big three like Ladero, Morris, and Ruidíaz, that is probably the best trio in the league against a relatively decent dynamic duo in Zalarian and also Zardes. And you notice I say dynamic duo and not trio because of the fact that since Santos is not available in this game, they pretty much are kind of relegated to the fact that those are two of the most lethal attackers for the Columbus Crew in this game. And again, I know it's easy to say that the Sounders clearly has the advantage toward that, and they do, but here's the problem with what the Sounders are dealing with coming into this game. You know those big three that I mentioned during this post, or those big three that I just mentioned? Well, during this postseason, besides the fact that they really showed up in that game against LAFC, when you look at those other game against Dallas and Minnesota, they didn't really show up for majority of the game, and there was times where there was frustration in terms of the Sounders attack. And you look back at that Dallas game, those big three in Ruidíaz, Morris, and Ladero didn't even get on the score sheet, and for most of the time they were getting frustrated by the fact that they weren't doing very well against the Dallas team, and they were also kind of struggling in terms of when they get to the final third, they don't know what exactly they need to do to find a good final ball to create clear-cut chances. And we saw it again in that game against Minnesota. And besides the last 15 minutes of the game, and I might be biased in terms of saying this, but I really think the reason why eventually those big three kind of got going in the last 15 minutes isn't really a lot to do with the fact that somehow the Sounders just found a switch. I think it's more has to do with the fact that Minnesota was definitely running out of gas in the last 15 minutes. And one thing I also didn't mention in that review back on Monday is that I was also kind of frustrated of why Adrian Heath decided to not really bring on some fresh legs into the team. I mean, you do know that your team have two shorter day rest compared to your opposition, and you can clearly see some of those players were definitely really carrying a very heavy leg, and that they were definitely running out of gas. So why not we bring some fresh legs into the team and just kind of see things out? And because of the fact that he decided not to do that, that's basically meant that the Sounders were pretty much playing against a defense that was pretty much on the gas tank. And when that happens, when you start to have tired legs and you start to lose your concentration in terms of defending, those are the moment we saw on. Those are kind of the moment where the Sounders, of course, were able to find space. But that being said, I will give credit in terms of the fact that the Sounders took advantage of a very tired Minnesota team. I don't think that's going to be the same with this Columbus Crew team, where I think throughout the full 90 minutes, I don't think they're going to run into any trouble where they're going to run out of energy. And keep in mind, coming into this game, it's actually the Sounders have one shorter day rest compared to the Columbus Crew. So the Crew is technically going to have slightly fresher legs compared to what the Sounders are in right now, and especially the fact that the Sounders were involved more of a physical battle than what the Columbus Crew had to deal with against New England. I really think this is a game in terms of fresh legging, who is probably going to be having the more energy, and the team that might not run out of gas by the end of the game. I would give the advantage toward the Columbus Crew. So that being said, in terms of going back to talk about the Sounders attack, they really need to step up in this game. Like those big three, they have not been at it for the last two games, and that doesn't mean that they cannot be at it at this game, and that somehow they could of course all showed up in the biggest game possible and really get the Sounders team over the edge. But in order to do that, they need to definitely show up, and they definitely need to be better whenever they get into the final third. And again, doing that Minnesota game, they were having a ton of trouble trying to find a good final ball, and there's just so many times when they crossed the ball into the box, it was just kind of aimless crosses to pretty much nobody into the box, and that's just something that the Sounders cannot continue if they want to, of course, score goals against this Crew defense that is probably even better than what the defense that they face against Minnesota in the conference final. And then the final thing I will say in terms of the key points is that will Columbus sit back despite the fact that they're being at home, and the fact that their style of play is that they like to control the game. Yes, the Crew is a team that is more of a possession team and like to kind of control the game. But the problem is, most of the time that they've been able to do that is when they have Darlington Nagbe in their starting 11. And this is also where I go back to how big of a loss this is for Nagbe in terms of it really disrupt the way that they want to play, because without Nagbe, they don't really have that security blanket in terms of trying to control the game. So if that's the case, then do they decide to try to sit back and put in a little bit of a low block against the Seattle Sounders? And we've seen before, the Sounders do have trouble at times whenever they try to break down a low block team. Or do Columbus decided to just go with their usual kind of style, which is just kind of control the game? Like, one thing that if they do decide to do that, they better hope that their defense have a decent answer in terms of trying to deal with the Sounders potentially go on the counterattack. We know the Sounders team, whenever they go on transition, and they showed it in that game against Minnesota, they were wickedly fast in terms of going on the counter attack, and there are just numerous times they just completely overrun the Loons midfield because of how fast they were going on the transition and going on the counter attack. And the Crew throughout this season, one of the things that they've done very well this season is dealing with those teams that trying to go quickly on the counter attack, and most of the time the Crew is able to snuff it out. But that being said, most of those times that they've been able to successfully deal with is when Nagbe is in the starting 11. So yeah, this is going to be very interesting, and that overall, I don't know how this game in terms of tactically it's going to look, and I'm not quite sure. Will the Crew decide to just kind of control the game, or they'll just kind of sit back and let the Sounders have most of the ball? But either way, I know I said the same thing when I talk about the Crew versus New England. I feel like this is just also going to be one of those games. Maybe there's only going to be a goal in this one, and it could be a bit of a low scoring game, and that, again, it is very crucial. If whoever grabbed the first goal is potentially going to win this game. And heck, when you look back of the last couple of MLS Cup, I don't remember the last time in an MLS Cup where a team is able to take the lead first, and the fact that they would eventually lose an MLS Cup. Like, it wasn't, last year was definitely not the case, because the Sounders took the lead against TFC and they never let go of it. Same case with 2018. Atlanta took the lead first and they never let go of it against Portland. 2017, Toronto was able to take the lead against Seattle. They never let go of it. 2016, obviously we didn't see any goals and it took to a penalty kick shootout. And then 2015, 2015, the last time Columbus was in the MLS Cup. And I know there's already kind of jokes right now talk about how the first 6 minutes is probably going to be the most nervous moment for the Columbus crew, because we know what happened back in 2015 when they made a goalkeeping howler literally on the first minute of the game, and then eventually they allow another goal just 5 minutes later after that to go 2-0 down at home very early. And that, I know there's probably, again, people are going to make the joke the fact that the first 6 minutes is the most nervous time for the crew, but hey, I think this time they'll learn their mistake, and they probably won't make a goalkeeping howler literally just 1 minute into the game. So yeah, again, that being said about how I talk about whoever scored first most likely is win the MLS Cup. I think you have to go back maybe like not 2014. I don't remember if New England even took the lead early in the game, but it's been a while since basically a team that is able to score first in MLS Cup and eventually not come out of it winning the trophy. Now, finally, in terms of the last thing I'm going to look at in this preview is look at the position battle, and we start with the goalkeeping, and this is a bit tough to judge because I think both of these goalkeeper are definitely considered one of the best goalkeeper in the league. Eloy Rome, despite the fact that he hasn't played a lot of games during this postseason, and by the way, he is going to be back in this game from what I heard from the crew. He's been making some big save a couple of times during the season, and I know he also made a couple of big save in that game against the Red Bulls too. So I think he he have definitely showed that he is definitely a good goalkeeper alongside with Stephen Fry, who I think if I have to give the advantage, I'll give it to Columbus, knowing the fact that I've just said how Eloy Rome have made some big save during his short postseason run compared to Stephen Fry, where this postseason he hasn't really had to face a lot of big chances for opposition, and that he hasn't really had to be coming up with a massive save to pretty much keep his team in the game or potentially preserve the team to move on to the next round. So because of that, I'll give the edge toward Columbus, even though I think both of these goalkeeper are definitely good enough to, when they are going to have to be called upon of making a big save, they're definitely going to be there to do that. Now, in terms of the defense, I got to give it to Columbus again. And Columbus, you look at this defense, it is definitely rock solid, and that knowing the fact that how much the Sounders have trouble even against teams that might not have the best defense like Minnesota and Dallas, they're definitely going to have their works cut out against this very stingy defense that doesn't really allow a lot of chances and don't really make a lot of mistake at the back to give the Sounders a chance to capitalize on that. Now, in the midfield battle, I got to give it to the Sounders, and a lot of this has to be, with no Nagbe in the midfield for the crew. Their midfield is definitely much weaker now because of it. Now, if Nagbe was in this would have been kind of a toss-up, and it would have been hard to call between the Sounders midfield compared to Columbus midfield, that both of them are definitely very decent, but I have to give the edge to the Sounders because of the fact that Nagbe is not in this, and that they should definitely get the edge over that. Now, in the attack, got to give it to Seattle again. And even if Santos was available in this, I still will give the edge to the Sounders because, yes, I know the Big Three has really struggled in the last two game of the postseason, but as I said, if they can somehow find a way to show up in this game, and we have seen those Big Three players that have showed up in the biggest game and the biggest occasion, I think they're definitely going to get the advantage. And the fact that I've also said that those Big Three players are probably the best trio of attacking player compared to anyone else around the league. So I'll give the Sounders in terms of the attacking option. And in terms of coaching, I'll also give the edge over for the Sounders. And both of these head coach Brian Schmitza and Caleb Porter are definitely decent in terms of coaching their team. But the only reason why I give the edge for Schmitza is the fact that he has more postseason experience, and he have actually won more than what Caleb Porter has done. And that's not to disrespect the fact that Porter did win MLS Cup for the Portland Timbers. And I know there's also a joke saying that Caleb Porter is undefeated whenever he is coaching a team in an MLS Cup game at Montford Stadium. But I just think in terms of coaching wise, and if you want to talk about more success and a coach that have regularly got this team into the playoffs and always make a deep playoff run, it's got to be Brian Schmetzer that has the coaching edge over Caleb Porter in terms of that. But yeah, there you have it. That is pretty much it for my preview of MLS Cup. I know this was a bit of an in-depth of video, and you know, this is definitely twice as long of a preview I usually do with my usual preview of each game. But again, this is the biggest game of the season, and let's just hope that from now till tomorrow we will not hear any other breaking news talk about how one of these players might not be available because of COVID-19, or the worst case scenario is the fact that this game might be canceled and might suffer the same fate as what we saw in the USL Championship, where literally days leading up to the game, they basically said that they can't play the game because one of the team just have too many COVID cases for them to safely play the final game of the season. So yeah, let's hope things are going to be calm before we get into the actual game that is going to be taking place tomorrow. And of course, I will definitely immediately do the review of the game after the game, of course, is over. And that also means that most likely I won't actually know who won the MVP of the game, and probably I'll also kind of watch the trophy ceremony as I'm, of course, doing the review of this game. And eventually, when they do announce who is the MVP of the MLS Cup, then I, of course, will add it onto the board. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button, and also let me know in the comments below your prediction for this game. I'm not even going to go do a prediction, mainly because of how inconsistent I've been in terms of making prediction. And I also don't want to make a prediction because people are going to be, or one of these fan base are going to be very angry at me if I made a prediction and I just kind of jinxed their team. They're going to literally go back to this video and put in the comment section, you shouldn't have jinxed our team because you predicted us of winning this. So that being said, all I'll say is may the best team wins in this MLS Cup. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.